Jon Mendez here, and we're doing another of our how-tos. And this one is about how to make a little strop to secure the anchor to the boat, so that even though you've winched it in, the winch is taking all the weight of that anchor, and at sea it can work its way loose. Now some people use a bit of rope, some people have a fitment that attaches it, and we're going to make one of those just in a very simple manner to allow the owner of this to make sure the anchor stays on the boat. Now they had an incident where the winch slipped whilst they were at sea, the anchor lowered a bit, damaged the boat because they were going along, cost a few quid because it's a blue hull and that's hard to match. So we're going to make that less likely to happen. The only disadvantage of having a secure method of the anchor being stowed is you have to go forward to release that if you need to anchor. So you just have to remember that the anchor is permanently attached until you undo the strop. So we're just going to go through what we do. So my plan is we're going to use one of these, which is called a pad eye, and that's got 4 holes in. So we're going to bolt that to the deck inside the anchor locker, and then we're going to use a catch, and this one opens and secures nice and securely, so you have to pull that to release it. That's going to go through the chain, and I've whipped that to the end of this bit of rope. So once I've worked out where this is going to go, I'm going to thread that through and whip the other end, which will then mean that once it's done up and attached to the chain, the anchor cannot leave the boat until we're ready. So to do that, we're going to need obviously drill to drill the holes, drill bits. Always use a small bit on GRP first to cut the hole, and then a bigger bit for the size you need. Bolts to hold it down, and they might look a bit long, but the deck's quite thick. Bit of tape. I put tape on the GRP first so that the drill bit doesn't slide. And then once we've cut and whipped this on, we're going to need to cut the line that we've used, so we've got some whipping twine for that. And I've got a hot knife, which is a great way to cut anything synthetic because it seals it as it cuts. Just a pair of scissors will work, and a match to seal it if you wish. And then once that's all done, little nut and bolt set to tighten the screws up. In simple terms, we're going to bolt that on the deck just about here. The thing I did was feel underneath to make sure there was nothing in the way, and also to work out how thick it was and were my bolts long enough. Then when this is attached, and it just feeds through there, it's a weeny bit fiddly, but once it's through, we need this close enough so that when that's whipped on there, we've got enough free to be able to get it off and on. If I made it too tight, I'd never be able to get it off and on, so it needs to be about there. So my first step will be to drill the holes to put this down, but I'm not going to bolt it down yet because I then need to do that bit of whipping because it's much easier to do it here and then bolt it down. So that's my plan of action: drill holes, whip that on, then bolt that down. So now I've got a rough plan. I'm going to put some tape onto the GRP, and the reason for that is that when you drill GRP, unless you're very careful, it splinters. So you put a bit of tape down first, take your pen, there's my pen, make sure my position still works, yeah, happy with that, and do some little marks for my drill holes. So I'm all prepped. Now before I drill holes and start using small screws, nuts and bolts, from bitter experience things roll off the bow of the boat like crazy, and I've only got a small umbrella today, but I use an umbrella hung upside down on the bow just to catch, and it's amazing how many times that's saved the only nut I've got that fits. So, and you might think it's quite safe here, but there's a nice channel here which just funnels things straight off the bow and into the water. So we have a cunning plan. A bigger brolly would be good, but a brolly's better than none. So I've drilled my 4 holes. I started them backwards to just cut through the gel by grinding rather than cutting, because that will chip it. And I've turned the drill into forwards and drilled 4 pilot holes all the way through, and it's about that thick. There's a metal plate in there, so we've gone through that as well. Now I'll swap to a bigger bit, which is the diameter of the bolts, and drill 4 holes all the way through. So I've just swapped to a bigger drill. This one's slightly fatter than the actual diameter of the bolts I'm going to use. I want to push the bolts through. I'll put a bit of sealant on them to stop water getting into the deck. So these are the bolts I brought, and we need to make sure they're long enough. I've done this before and brought bolts that are a bit too short. So when I drop it in the hole, just got to pop my hand underneath, and I've got about that much sticking out the bottom. So that's enough for the plate on top, the washer underneath and the nut. So when I do it all up, it will stay secure, and that's very important. So just before I bolt it down, I'm actually going to attach my lanyard to this, because it's much easier to whip these two together sat comfortably rather than bent over here. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm happy with my length, make sure it can still attach and undo, and I need about that much. So it's about the width of my thumb. I'm going to do a whipping on there, a bit like this one, just to attach these together. So we said we needed about a thumb's width of loop. So there's my thumb. So that's my rough approximation of how much I need, so that this is not too long or too short. Now, we could have that professionally spliced, but we're doing on the boat, so that's not always practical. So we can what's called whip it. So I've just got some whipping twine, and I cut that with the hot knife, the same as I cut that with the hot knife to the length I wanted. And the hot knife, as it sounds, it's just very hot and it slices through, but when it's synthetic material, it also seals. So it makes a nice neat end which doesn't fray. So I put a knot in the end of my whipping twine, and then starting on the inside, I'm going to push my needle all the way through and pull, so that my knot is going to be on the inside of my whipping, and therefore it doesn't get in the way. And then the next bit's quite easy. We're just going to wind once, twice, 3 times. Now we do 3 because now when we pull, they really bite in, like so, and they cut to hold the 2 lines together. And then we do the same thing again. 1, 2, 3, and you can see there's a slight gap there, so I push them all up so they're really nice and tight, and then I pull again. And you can pull every time, depends on the rope. We're just working our way round until we've got the width of the rope, as in the 2 together, in whipping. So that's wider than the 2 ropes together, so that's okay, and that will hold that really securely. Now to make that off, we go through the piece we whipped, pull that down, come back up the end. I'll show you with it in a second. So we've now gone round it twice, back through the hole. Really good pull. So what we're doing is we're tightening the whipping we made by pulling on the centre. We'll do a third big pull, so that you can see that's really biting tightly now. Back once more, and then we can finish that by just doing a little knot there by going in and through, pull nice and tight, same again, in and through, he says, dropping it. And then to get rid of that, we can just poke it back through so the end is actually hidden inside the line. So I'll just cut that off now with my hot knife, and I've got a really nice tight secure whipping, same as at that end, and that will hold really tight. That's not going anywhere. So just before I bolt it down, I'm going to make sure, using my new little pull, that this actually goes through the hole and it reaches. Yep, I'm happy with that. That's fantastic. That's really good news. And then each of the bolts, a bit of sealant will go on there inside the hole, and then on the bottom we're going to use a big penny washer to spread the load, and then we're going to use nylock bolts. And this is the moment when the umbrella's handy, because if I drop any of this, it's guaranteed to land in the sea, so the umbrella's going to catch it. So all we're going to do is bolts in, sealant on the bolts, washers on the bottom, nuts on the bottom of that. So in summary now, we've got strong pad attached, string attached to that, little bit that goes through the anchor chain itself, and a nice, easy to remove but nice and secure shackle with its handle. Just means that this is not going anywhere, so we can take off the rather Heath Robinson bit of string, hose it all down, job's done.